All right, we're going to go over how to dimension this simple part using the dimensioning rules and guidelines that you learned about in the introduction to dimensioning presentation. And so how I always tell people they should start when they're first learning how to dimension something is find a starting point. And sometimes in engineering we would call this a datum point. And so I'm going to always start when I'm creating width dimensions from the left, and I'm going to work my way to the right. And so if I do that, if I start with width dimensions and work from left to right, the first thing I need to dimension, the first point I run into is where the width of this L shape comes through. And so I would go ahead and I would add some extension lines in. I would put my dimension in. It's a 1/2 inch. And then I'm going to actually put my dimension line on the outside because I don't have room to fit it on the inside. All right? And so that's the first width dimension. Again, moving from left to right across the object, the next thing I run into is this hidden line. Well, our dimensioning rules tell us we should not dimension to a hidden line. So I cannot dimension this to this point in the front view. I need to do it in the top view. So if I go up in the top view, I can draw my extension line down from what this hidden line represents, which is this little cutout. I can write in my dimension. It is 1 inch. And I can put my dimension line in. The next thing that I have, I've dimensioned to that, I've dimensioned to that. The next width we have is just the overall width of the object. I could either do that on the top view or the front view. I think in this case, I am going to go ahead and do that on the top view because it will make for a shorter extension line. And so it wouldn't necessarily be wrong if you put this dimension on the front view. It's just a different way to do it. And I'm justifying my decision at putting it in the top view because then my extension line, this extension line coming off the object is shorter. All right? Okay. Height dimensions now. Height dimensions are located in the front view and the right side view. And so if I go through and do my height dimensions, moving from bottom to top on those two views, the first thing I run into is this height for this shape. I could dimension it in the front view here or the right side view. The better decision for this one would be in the front view because it actually shows the shape. It's not represented just by a line like it is in the right side view. So again, I'll put that dimension here. I'm going to put my dimension lines on the outside because I don't have room, and I'll put my dimension in the middle. The next thing we run into is this hidden line right here. We know we can't dimension to a hidden line, so I need to do this dimension in the right side view. So I'll put that going from bottom to top there, right side, write in my dimension. And that takes care of that dimension. The next thing we run into, we have this dimension. We have to that hidden line dimension, we need the overall height. I'm going to go ahead and again do that in the right side view so I don't have to draw a long extension line across the object. And I'll write in that dimension. Now, one thing I want you to notice is all of the dimensions for height start at the base of the object and work their way up. All of the dimensions for width start on the left side of the object and work their way to the right. And so when you're first learning how to dimension, that's a simple technique to use so that you're making sure that you have all the dimensions you need to completely describe the object. Our last set of dimensions we have are depth dimensions. In the right side view, depth dimensions run from left to right. And in the top view, dimensions run from bottom to top. The depth dimensions do. So I'll just move my way across this object from left to right. The first thing we run into is this little cutout space right here. I could dimension it here or in the top view. I'm going to dimension it in the right side view because it shows the detail better. Put a dimension line in. Now I can't fit the dimension between the object, so I'm going to put it out here on the outside of my extension lines. The next thing we run into is this other side. Actually, it's this object. Again, moving from left to right, we run into this right here. So this represents this cutout. And so instead of doing that on the right side view, I'm actually going to do that over here on the top view because it shows the detail better. The next thing I run into is the other side of that, and so that's this point in the top view. Again, I'm going to dimension that on the top view because it shows the detail better. It's 0.75, and I'll put that in. The next thing I run into is this corner right here, and so I can go ahead and put that in, put it right here. 1 inch. And the last dimension I have for depth is this overall depth of the object. And I will just put that, go ahead and put that right over here in the right side view. So draw these extension lines up more, put in my dimension, draw on my dimension line. All right. And so that's the basic way to dimension an object. It's a very easy and simple technique to use because you can make sure that you have all the dimensions that you need just by going across the object and making sure all your dimensions start at the same place. So again, all of my width dimensions start on the left, and they dimension to what they are going to on as you work your way across the object. My height dimensions start at the bottom, and they work my way up the object, and my depth dimensions start left, or in this case on the bottom, and go clear across the object. And so it's a simple example of how to create and put dimensions in your object.